Joker, Mr. Freeze, Bane, Harley Quinn. When you think of Batman's Rogues Gallery, these are the characters most people think of, but the title of Batman's most personal villain doesn't belong to any of them, instead belonging to the Phantasm from the 1993 film. A villain with a very personal connection to Bruce Wayne, the Phantasm might not be as widely known, but is very highly regarded by the fans who have seen the film. On the 181st episode of Villain Review, I will be doing a full breakdown of the villain, as well as answering the questions, are they one of Batman's best villains, and what score would I give them scale of 1 to 10? Welcome back to Villain Review, let's analyze Phantasm.
Andrea Beaumont.
Bruce Wayne.
To understand the Phantasm motives, we have to go all the way back to before Bruce Wayne was Batman. Still the boy millionaire we all know and love, the man still grieving his parents' death, and one day he goes to the most romantic place possible to meet girls, the cemetery. While visiting his parents' grave, Bruce meets Andrea Beaumont, who's there visiting her own mother, and the two immediately strike up a pretty good conversation about their love of dead parents. Having seemingly a lot in common, the two develop a relationship to the point Alfred walks in on them smooching, so I'd say it's pretty serious. Bruce would meet her dad, the creepy gangsters who want to kill him, don't worry about it, and even drop his idea of being Batman in order to be happy with Andrea. Shortly after that, the two would even agree to get married. Unfortunately though, Andrea's father owes a lot of money to some bad dudes, including the bad dude who eventually becomes Joker. In a desperate attempt to avoid their punishment, Andrea's dad decides to flee Gotham and take Andrea with him, forcing her to break off the engagement with Bruce, allowing him to pursue his fallback plan of being the Caped Crusader. One day while Andrea was getting groceries, their pursuers would catch up with them, leading to the not yet Joker killing her dad. A few years later, she'd return to Gotham as the Phantasm and start picking off the people responsible for her father's death one by one, mistakenly being taken for Batman by the police all along the way. I will say that her motivation is a bit of a mixed bag for me. On one hand, the revenge motive isn't anything new. In fact, we've seen it before in other Batman villains, I think done even better. There's nothing particularly interesting or innovative about it, just a revenge plot we've seen many times before. Where things get a little interesting though is when you consider her connection to Bruce and what caused the revenge path she's on. Andrea became parentless due to the mob killing her dad. Bruce became parentless for very similar reasons. What makes Andrea interesting is the way that she mirrors Bruce and the way he handled his parents' death. But more on that later.
So you figured it out.
Gotta hand it to you, nice scheme.
When Phantasm is actually Phantasm, it's pretty dang cool. The darker nature of the character perfectly reflects Batman the way Andrea does. It looks just similar enough to Batman, but with a darker twist. The mouth is covered, ominous fog is always following, and the scythe itself establishes Phantasm as an immediate deadly threat. Phantasm moves slow and menacingly towards its victims in a calm and stocky manner that feels very similar to a character like Michael Myers. The voice is cool, and that Angel of Death line is incredible. It keeps the tone of the character dark and mysterious, and I'm glad Phantasm's tone is never compromised for the sake of a joke. Instead, the film later on uses Joker as a way of lightening things up. The best part of the character is Andrea's connection to Bruce and the way the story perfectly goes back and forth between past and present. By showing us a young Bruce and Andrea, we learn a lot more about Batman, and that's what I really enjoy. The fact that if you replace Phantasm with any other villain, the movie falls apart. The movie is not about Phantasm like any means, like how some people say The Dark Knight is about Joker. Instead, they're just a tool to teach the audience more about Bruce and what makes him special as a hero. It's actually a pretty influential story, and you see this film show its influence in a lot of Batman media, particularly Red Hood. The themes of this movie all have to deal with the duality of a character. Bruce has to choose between love and Batman. Andrea chooses Phantasm over love when she returns to Gotham, and then the film deals with the duality of a vigilante in fighting for vengeance or justice. Bruce knows it's better to fight for justice. Phantasm is convinced vengeance is the solution. In a way, Bruce and Andrea are the same person deciding exactly how to best deal with the trauma of losing their parents. It's a deeply personal story for Bruce, and I think that's why Phantasm isn't in the movie that much, because it's not about them, it's about Bruce and Andrea. There is something that kind of bothers me about Phantasm though, and that's how it's never really explained how they're able to take gunshots like they're literally a ghost and seemingly vanish into thin air in a matter of seconds. It might be used as a way to better hide the twist, making the Phantasm far more supernatural than to be Andrea, but revisiting it, I'm a little just confused. It kind of takes me out of it. Not that I have to know exactly how Phantasm works and like all the little, the engineering and stuff like that, but it just seems a little weird going back and watching these scenes.
Time to pay for your sins, Mr. Bronsky.
Like I said, it's a bummer the actual Phantasm itself doesn't have more scenes because I like having a creepier Batman villain and I love the tone around the character, but it pretty much just evaporates into nothing as the movie goes on. I know I just said it's not about Phantasm, but if you made the movie like 20 minutes longer to have another really cool Phantasm scene, I don't think anyone would be complaining about it. I also think that the film suffers a bit from the common Batman affliction of, oh no, Joker was the villain all along kind of thing. The inclusion of Joker in the story I think is really there to further solidify how similar Bruce and Andrea are and how they deal with Joker, because the question is always like, oh, how come Batman doesn't kill Joker? I think that's why he's here, and by no means does it take away from the story, but I think I might have preferred figuring out a way to just keep the story between Bruce and Andrea, having a conclusion that feels more about them instead of Joker just being here as like a third wheel. I am not even going to begin to speculate what that would look like, but it's just my preference, okay? Aside from those gripes, I like all the flashbacks we have between the two, and I admire how they make the themes accessible to even a younger audience. At the end of the day, it sounds a little weird, but I don't think the Phantasm is that memorable of a villain. Not that the movie isn't, far from it. I think this movie is one of the things that stands out to me from the animated series era. I just think that because the Phantasm and Andrea are tools to further explore Bruce, that's what I remember, Bruce's story, not really much about Andrea except her role in Bruce's story. I touched on it a little earlier, but I think the movie is so focused on Bruce, they might have forgotten to make Andrea interesting as a character. Personality-wise, I see her more as a story device than a character because I can't really tell you much about Andrea outside of her relationship to Bruce, and the more unique aspect of the character, the Phantasm, isn't featured on screen nearly as much as I would have liked. The idea of someone from Bruce's past coming back to get vengeance in a much darker way, the seeds are planted here and I think perfected years later with Red Hood. Phantasm, Andrea, I kind of see them as Red Hood Mark I. Both have a personal connection to Bruce from the past. They disappeared for some years and now they're coming back to fight crime in a darker way that Bruce doesn't approve of. The big difference though is I think Jason Todd is far more interesting as a character than Andrea. I know it, you know it, let's not lie to each other.
This madness ends now.
Overall, I'd say the Phantasm is a pretty good Batman villain who perfectly mirrors both Bruce and Batman, leading into one of the best Bruce Wayne stories I think ever told. We don't actually see the Phantasm that much, which is a shame, and I wish the character's abilities made at least an attempt to make sense, but the movie isn't about Phantasm, it's about Bruce and Andrea. I enjoy the character, but there lies my biggest complaint. It's a character so focused on telling Bruce's story, I think it falls a little short of being memorable in its own right. Andrea isn't particularly interesting outside of her role in Bruce's story, and I think that's why when people look back at this film, they go, oh, Bruce is really good. Oh, it's such a good Bruce Batman story, rather than like, oh, Andrea is a really good character. It's why Phantasm only really makes sense in this story because everything interesting about the character is tied to this story. I'm not saying every character has to be like Joker and come back all the time, but it's just my opinion. I am going to give the Phantasm an 8.
The place is wired to explode.
No. One way or another, it ends tonight.
Thank you so much for watching Villain Review. I make a new one every single Monday. Let me know what you think of Phantasm in the comments below and who I should review next. Thanks again for watching. Here are more videos. I'm gonna go now.